Just want to know. Story 1. Man, I am reading this as a man, and I never knew how bad it was for some men. I am lucky I missed out on this experience. Story 2. I thought this was just something people said, but I had a long makeout session with a girl in high school. It got pretty intense, but she was adamant about nothing below the waist. I dropped her off at home and went straight to bed since I had an early morning. Keep in mind, I am older, so this was before smartphones. I did not take care of myself that night. The next day, I woke up with my normal morning erection, but it was very firm. I also experienced aching and soreness in my scrotum. I was not sure if it was from buildup or from grinding aggressively while making out. It was not a pain like getting kicked, but more like a sore or pulled muscle. It went away on its own by evening. Story 3. Your testicles ache. It is a dull ache, and if it becomes severe, it can cause nausea. It is quite uncomfortable. Story 4. Poetically, it is like the pressure of stepping on the tubing of a water hose with no garden to water. Story 5. It literally feels like someone is gently and increasingly squeezing your testicles. The pain often radiates into your lower back, making it feel like you are sandwiched with discomfort. Masturbation may ultimately help, but the recovery time from the pain will vary. Also, the pain often makes it difficult to focus on finishing the activity. Story 6. It has happened exactly once in my life, so I understand why some people think it is not real. It is rare in my experience. It just feels like pressure, similar to having a really bad sinus infection, but in the testicles. Story 7. Never had it before myself until one night when a girl I was not necessarily dating yet, but we were getting there, slept over and we shared a bed. Again, nothing happened, but cuddling together and feeling that intense ache down there was awful. I had to get up and walk around because of how painful it was. It went away after a while. Joys of being a horny teenager, I guess. Story 8. Pressure on the testicles like someone trying to crush them gently. It is not painful to the point where you cannot function, but it can feel like it is impairing you. I find this happens when I become aroused multiple times in a short time frame. This has never happened from a single moment of arousal. Story 9. For me, it is a sensation of extreme sensitivity. No one is allowed to make them move. It is a heavier pain. The only thing I can compare it to is if you overeat dinner and have pain in your stomach. The pain would be down in my testicles. Your body is signaling that it needs to make that release, but in the meantime, the sensation of sensitivity and heavy weight down below makes you not want to bother it. However, you need to do it in order to release it. Once it has been released, the sensation clears up rather rapidly. Story 10. I only experienced discomfort twice, both times as a teenager. Each time involved very heavy petting for the first time in my life without reaching climax. I assume it has something to do with blood flow and the duration of an erection. Story 11. It is similar to the feeling of a swollen, achy muscle. Can range from annoying to painful. Ejaculation, of course, relieves it quicker, but it will eventually ease off after a few minutes. Medically, it is called epididymal hypertension. It is not, however, a reason to pressure a partner into sex. Women can also experience a version of epididymal hypertension. Story 12. I only experienced this in high school when I would spend hours making out, but sex was not an option and I was alone to masturbate, so I spent hours feeling uncomfortable without climaxing. I would describe it as a cramp in the testicles, like a sharp pain that worsens with movement. When it reached that point, I was never able to masturbate because any stimulation in the area was extremely painful. I would have to lie still for several hours, often overnight, and then the pain would lessen over the next 24 hours. It was severe enough that I ended a relationship with a very religious girl I was interested in because she wanted to make out constantly, and I was too embarrassed to explain how much it was hurting me. Story 13. I have experienced it exactly twice. Previously, I thought it was totally a myth. Both times, I was getting very aroused and repeatedly edging in a situation where we could not go further. I felt a strange soreness and pressure. When I checked, the scrotum was somewhat swollen, tender, and actually bluish-purple. Masturbation fixed it nearly instantly. Within about 30 seconds, the pain was gone. I was very surprised because I thought the blue thing was metaphorical, not literal. Story 14. It is precisely like a migraine headache. It is a diffuse ache like pressure buildup or if you were compressed by something. Story 15. It's just very achy. Not like you got kicked, more like a headache but in your testicles. My testicles also feel heavier, which contributes to the aching. Story 16. Pain extends into the stomach, causing discomfort. Dizziness and inability to concentrate occur. Walking is very painful. Every movement feels like a punch to the testicles. There is no desire for sexual activity because nothing feels right. Ejaculating provides relief, but it takes 2 to 3 hours for the pain to subside. It is important to remain still for at least 15 to 20 minutes afterward. Otherwise, the pain may become overwhelming. This experience is very unpleasant and not recommended. Story 17. A tight pain, almost like a cramp but duller. Most of the time, it does not reach the level of pain for me, just extremely uncomfortable. Story 18. It seems like this is not a universal experience for all men. I swear on whatever you want me to that, it is real and painful, debilitatingly painful. It hasn't happened to me since I was in my mid-teens. It kind of feels like being kicked in the testicles. Not the actual impact of a kick, but the resulting aching pain that has you hunched over for several minutes to an hour. You can't really walk and don't want to move at all. The abdomen cramps up and aches. It's likely the closest a man can feel to what women experience during menstrual cramps. At least, it's the only pain I've experienced that comes close to what's been described, so I'm sympathetic. I once thought that taking care of myself in the restroom would help after an interruption of intense dry humping, but it just made it worse. I have no idea how that works, but maybe it's because there was already swelling of blood in my testicles. Adding more, even if I drained them of sperm, just made them feel like they were literally going to explode. A total rupture, very scary. It happened frequently when I was with a girl and all we could do was dry hump, inching closer and closer to sex without actually having it, or later, when we did, being interrupted midway through sex because of parents or something similar. It is totally real. I know it has a bad reputation as a manipulation tactic for men to guilt women into going further than they are comfortable with, but all I can say is you'll know he's not lying if he can't walk after his erection is already deflated. I think I've heard of women experiencing something similar if they become highly aroused but are abruptly interrupted. Story 19. Physically, there is a dull ache that feels like the second half of being kicked in the testicles without the initial excruciating pain. Story 20. I believe the term I heard was arousal-induced vascular congestion. The body prepares itself for a strong ejaculation that is never released. Feels as it sounds, swollen and sore. It is not pleasant, but definitely not a big deal. It is also something easily managed. Probably similar to waking up feeling really sore. You are still able to go to work. I have dated women who have complained about swollen or sore breasts. It is probably similar. Story 21. Winter of my senior year of high school. I was 17 and did not have my license yet. Dry humping on my girlfriend's couch during Saturday Night Live. My mom came to pick me up. I rolled off her and the pain when my feet hit the floor was intense. I limped out to the car. My mom asked me what was wrong and why the house was dark, and I said my feet had fallen asleep. I got home and masturbated immediately, but the horrible ache lasted at least an hour. Felt like getting kicked in the testicles. Truly terrible. This was the first and only time I experienced this. Story 22. It feels like you got tapped on the testicles a bit, kind of an incessant dull ache in the lower abdomen region, and it feels like your testicles are being squeezed. That being said, there are a lot of misconceptions around epididymal hypertension, so here is some information for those who want to be informed. For one, epididymal hypertension is real. The medical term for it is epididymal hypertension. With that out of the way, if a man tells you that he is in pain from epididymal hypertension after he has had an erection for a few minutes, then unless he had epididymal hypertension prior to meeting with you, he is not being truthful. Epididymal hypertension does not happen just because there is arousal. It happens after prolonged and usually stimulated arousal if there is no release. Keywords: prolonged and stimulated. Men do not get epididymal hypertension after every single erection that does not get resolved, so do not let them mislead you about that. But in case you ever become intimate with a man and then change your mind, inadvertently causing epididymal hypertension, he can manage it himself. Do not let him guilt trip you into continuing something you do not want to because he says, you caused it, and he needs your help. In summary, if you stimulate a man for a few minutes with no release and then change your mind, he will not get epididymal hypertension. If you stimulate a man for more than 30 minutes with no release and then change your mind, he is more likely to get epididymal hypertension, but that is not your responsibility since you are allowed to stop whenever you want. Story 23. My testicles ache in varying degrees and I feel nauseated. I give myself blue balls if I am aroused for too long. It does not even have to be fully erect. It is uncomfortable, and even ejaculation does not resolve it immediately. Story 24. In my experience, it only happens when you are with another person. Generally, it involves becoming extremely aroused by someone over an extended period without any release. Usually, a man can calm himself down, but sometimes it gets out of control. It is hard to explain what it feels like. It is half physical discomfort and half psychological and emotional discomfort. A good example is a man making out with his wife in bed and spending some serious time on foreplay when they hear the unmistakable sound of a 3-year-old's feet running through the house toward their bedroom because the child had a bad dream. Usually, that leads to discomfort known as blue balls. Story 25. Ache in the testicles. It is not the worst thing in the world, but it is not fun. I have not had it in 25 years. Story 26. My pain is definitely more physical than mental any day. It becomes extremely painful as well. I have never understood why I seem to experience it worse than almost any other man I know. It appears to worsen with age too. I have always thought of it as an evolutionary response telling you to procreate now. I feel it even when I am merely aroused by my wife, let alone any heavy petting. Story 27. Blue balls is an annoying dull ache in the testicles. Not a sharp pain, just a weird pressure that builds up when you are highly aroused and nothing happens. Sometimes it even feels like it spreads into the lower stomach. It is not serious, just uncomfortable for a while. It goes away eventually either with time or by relieving the arousal. Story 28. It is actually either extremely painful or there is a lot of discomfort. For me, it feels more like a mix of pressure on the testicles and actual soreness. Story 29. For me, at least, there seems to be a range of discomfort with blue balls. Some cause a dull ache, while others cause intense pain that makes walking difficult. However, it is nothing compared to a strike to the groin. Story 30. I understand. When I was expecting intimacy and felt aroused during dinner but then got rejected, it felt like a slight kick in the testicles. I didn't want to walk because it became sensitive. I thought it would go away if I masturbated, but that also caused pain in the testicles. I just wanted to lie down and not move much because movement caused pain. The discomfort usually went away after about 4 hours. This has happened many times. Story 31. No matter what your high school boyfriend told you, he was not in any medical danger just because you said no. Forced consent is not consent. Story 32. It is an ache and a growing frustration. Still, it is not a reason to put out if you do not want to. We survive. Story 33. Itchiness. Throbbing dull annoyance. Not really painful, more like a small pressure headache in the testicles. Story 34. The rare times my fiancé and I have sex and I cannot reach climax due to taking selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, I feel tightness because the body is preparing to climax but it does not happen, which can sometimes cause soreness. The discomfort resolves after I finish myself off later. Story 35. Pain in the testicles, lower abdomen, and surprisingly in the buttocks. It stings. It feels like you got kicked in the testicles with lower pain that persists for an unknown duration. I once experienced discomfort while hiking. It was difficult to walk. To alleviate it, ejaculation is necessary, but it hurts during the process, so it is unpleasant. Story 36. It's a dull ache, uncomfortable but not the kind of pain that would make you scream. When I was younger, my dad told me the best way to deal with it was by trying to lift a car by its bumper. I never found out if he was joking, but telling other people about his cure has been a good way to get some laughs. Story 37. I had chronic testicular pain for 10 years due to contracting mumps at age 20 for the second time in my life. Imagine something in your trousers that feels like someone is squeezing them really hard. That is what blue balls feel like. I experienced that, plus intense pain to the point that I was begging the doctor to remove them. Story 38. I used to experience it very intensely when I was between 15 and 21 years old. When I was highly sexually aroused for long periods without release, the pain would occur. Story 39. You feel like you have severe cramps but cannot have a bowel movement. It's a massive amount of pressure. I haven't experienced it in a long time, but I can tell you it is very uncomfortable. That said, it's no reason to pressure women or use it as an excuse to convince them to sleep with you. It is our problem to handle and manage as men. If you take care of yourself as you should, it won't be a problem. Story 40. It's like being kicked in the testicles, but instead of a sudden incredible shooting pain that goes away in about 20 minutes, it is slower and it lingers until you do something about it. Story 41. I got my first oral sex experience at 29. I was nervous and found the entire experience awkward, and I was unable to climax. I had pre-ejaculate come out several times, but it was not enough for me to climax. I spent the next 2 days with pain in my scrotum, and trying to climax was not an option since it hurt quite a bit. Story 42. Why is this topic so often controversial? It often ends up divided between people like myself describing what it is like from personal experience and people completely dismissing it as fake or no big deal without leaving any room for discussion. It happened a few times to me. I remember one time after playing board games with my cousin's friends for hours. They were very flirty, and when I got up, I realized it felt like I had been kicked in the testicles. Quite painful and did not go away for a few hours. It probably happened 4 to 5 times, but only when I was younger. It is real, and if you have not experienced it, that does not mean it is not real. People mention that men use it to try to force sex. Those men are wrongdoers bordering on criminal, but that still does not mean it is not real. It is just not anyone else's responsibility or problem. Story 43. Pretty bad stomach ache. I imagine it is probably like bad cramps in that it makes you quite irritable. Nothing that will kill you though. Story 44. Ovaries are the analogous structures to testicles, and women's descriptions of menstrual pain or ovarian conditions sound very similar to testicular pain. Story 45. Imagine a weight inside your testicles that is light enough to not cause injury but heavy enough to cause pain with even the slightest movement. Story 46. Not good. I have not been intimate since I was a teenager, getting close with girls but not completing the act due to timing and location. Story 47. The term blue balls relates back to the horse days and riding for a long time. It refers to testicular pain caused by prolonged bouncing while riding horses. Story 48. Cramps hurt whether you move or stay still. They last between 30 minutes and a few hours. They are more uncomfortable and inconvenient than truly painful. Story 49. Anyone saying it does not exist is incorrect. I have experienced blue balls several times, most memorably in high school, where we would spend hours making out, but due to being Christian virgins, we would not have sex. I remember being physically uncomfortable for hours, to the point where the pain was incapacitating. It felt like someone was trying to rip the testicles off my body for about 2 hours after she left. At the time, I had no idea what blue balls were. It mostly results from a combination of factors. Semen retention, more likely the longer you have not ejaculated. Prolonged erection, having a lot of pre-cum, and no ejaculation. There may be cases where some men exaggerate or use it as a strategy to get sex, but it is a real condition. It is difficult to understand anyone who denies its existence. Story 50. I experienced this a few days ago when the girl I was with suddenly had her period and was too embarrassed to continue. I think everyone feels it a bit differently, but here is my experience. It feels like your testicles want to crawl deep inside you but are stuck pulling against each other. The sensation feels like they are being consistently tapped. You get a terrible sinking feeling that makes you not want to move but know you will be okay. Story 51. Pain in the lower stomach and pubic area, including the testicles. Felt like a severe stomach ache until I researched what it could be. I had to literally crab walk because anything that touched the testicles was painful. The worst part was that you need to ejaculate to end the pain. But to ejaculate, your testicles have to move, causing pain. So you only have half an erection, and it takes longer to orgasm. A vicious circle of pain, and I hated it. Story 52. I never felt it in my testicles, to be honest. It feels like I am experiencing diarrhea and discomfort in the lower abdominal area. After reading some comments, am I actually experiencing epididymal hypertension? Story 53. Frustrated with some saying it is not a real thing or you could just go relieve yourself somewhere else if it hurts so bad. The question is, how would you explain this to your partner without it seeming like manipulation? Sorry, I just need to step away for a moment. It is a sensitive topic, to say the least. As for me, when I have gone through that experience, I chose to be quiet because I never want my partner to feel manipulated. But it is outrageous how some people say it does not exist just because they have not gone through it. Story 54. I have experienced it a few times. It feels like a light kick in the testicles. It hurts, but nothing unbearable. People using it as an excuse to force you into having sex are just foolish. Story 55. I only experienced it once, and it was my own fault because the girl actually wanted to have sexual intercourse. It feels like a slightly sharper kick to the testicles. Until that day, I thought it was a myth. Story 56. It physically hurts. Imagine a cramp, but in your genitals. After you experience blue balls, time is of the essence. You need to relieve yourself if a woman suddenly decides to back out. Otherwise, even if you do, your testicles will still feel sore, like a massive cramp. Story 57. Based on the number of men who say they have experienced it and those who say they have not, it would be very interesting to see if there has been a study on it and if it only affects certain men. It seems like a myth to some, including me, and a genuine concern for others. Are there any doctors available? Story 58. They are real, but they are not horrible or unbearable. Can be resolved simply by ejaculating. To help you recognize the sensation, imagine doing physical labor for a day where you constantly use your muscles. The next day, you feel pain. The following day, when your muscles are still a bit sore but you can move around more, is what it feels like. It is like a dull ache. I would say stomach aches are more painful. Erections happen because blood flows to the penis. Discomfort known as blue balls occurs because blood vessels open, allowing more blood to flow through, and then close, limiting blood flow, which makes the penis softer. In my opinion, anyone saying they don't exist has never felt it, but it usually needs to happen over the course of 3 or more hours. Story 59. Imagine that you are about to sneeze, but someone reaches out and pinches your nostrils, stopping you from doing it and giving you a headache for the rest of the day. Now imagine that happening in your testicles. Story 60. I only experienced blue balls once, and it was quite painful. The testicles hurt. This happened when I was 18, after a concert where I danced with a woman for hours. During the car ride back, I was anxious, debating whether to go to the doctor. This was about 16 years ago, so I don't fully remember the pain, but I felt it around the tubes that connect to the body. Story 61. Not a myth. It is like plugging a hose and the tube expands, and that pressure eventually causes pain. If you are not a man, close your mouth and inflate your cheeks as hard as you can for as long as you can. It is kind of uncomfortable, isn't it? Yes, not a myth, science. Story 62. For me, it feels like someone is squeezing my testicles hard, but the pressure is much closer to the perineum, making me feel like I want to vomit. The pain lasts from 30 minutes to 4 hours. Story 63. If this were blue boobs, every time you take a step, your breasts bounce and ache intensely. They would be sensitive to the touch, could feel like they are being squeezed constantly, on the verge of bursting. The pain would radiate into your abdomen. Story 64. My memory of it, considering that our brains do not retain the memory of pain very vividly, is that blue balls felt like someone twisting my testicles from the inside of the body, not the outside. The pain was in and above the scrotum region. Story 65. It is absolutely real and feels like a dull ache. Ejaculation is the recommended cure, and that makes sense. However, it is no guarantee of at least instant relief. Story 66. For me, it feels like a cramp in the groin, but to be very transparent, it is not a huge pain and it does not last forever. I have never had it from just not having an orgasm over days or a week, but being turned on and edging close without ever releasing does make it happen for me. Story 67. It literally gives your sore and aching testicles the sensation of someone holding your shaft aside to get a perfect shot on just your testicles. Story 68. Never had it before, so I would not know. I have a right hand that works perfectly fine in times of need. Story 69. Is it strange that I am a 51-year-old normal man who has had many sexual relationships and many makeout sessions that ended without ejaculation when I was younger, and even some recently interrupted by children and other situations, and I have no idea what is meant by blue balls? Story 70. I do not know, but I am a male and I have been close to ejaculating but have not been allowed to finish, and it has not been that bad. Story 71. Basically, it feels like my testicles are cramping. For me, ejaculation does not necessarily help, and the pain lasts for a few hours or even until the next day. Story 72. Like a low-level version of getting kicked in the testicles that lasts longer. However, I do not think it genuinely happens very often. I have only experienced it maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, and not for over a decade. Story 73. It's like feeling nauseous and having 2 migraines, but both sensations are in your testicles. Personally, it doesn't go away until a few hours later, sometimes the next day. Story 74. Like a slow, throbbing cramp that creeps up on you. It is painful and you feel really weak at the same time. It only ever happened to me twice after I was close to orgasm but never had the release. The first time, I was wondering what was going on. By the second time, I knew enough about it to resolve the discomfort before it got worse. It is a real condition in my opinion, but the term is often used as an exaggeration. I am convinced that 95% of men who say they actually have this condition either are not truthful or have never experienced what it actually feels like. Story 75. Dull, painful ache that does not stop until it wears off over several hours or ejaculation occurs. Then there is instant relief after an orgasm. Story 76. It's like walking around with 2 twisted ankle pains between your legs. Every testicle is swollen, so woe unto those with thick thighs and tight jeans. Each testicle is tied to a string connected to your kidneys, so every movement makes them scream in unison. It was so painful that I had to lose all sense of decency, shoved my hands down my pants, and readjusted my comfort zone. Story 77. If you have ever suffered any injury in your life, it is nothing close to blue balls because it is barely an inconvenience. A sprained ankle, jammed finger, or broken nose hurts much worse, and those are not that bad. Story 78. It aches really badly. It almost feels like your testicles swell and become sensitive, even though that is not what actually happens. Sitting hurts, but standing hurts too. The best way I can describe it to somebody is like there is a headache in each of your testicles, except your head does not have to touch anything and your testicles do. Additionally, the semen afterwards is unusual and very watery. Story 79. I am a 38-year-old man and I still cannot tell by reading all these comments if this is a real thing. I thought it was something teenagers say to pressure their partners into sex. With all the variety and answers, I am still not convinced. Story 80. It hurts similar to a kick to the groin. It is a sharp kind of pain that goes deep into your body behind your stomach. Story 81. First off, it is 100% a real thing. I have experienced it multiple times, about 10. The duration and intensity vary. It never lasted more than a day for me. At its worst, it felt like an 8 out of 10 achy, tender pain in the testicles. I recall one awkward, sad episode because I had to go to work and did not want to be on my feet all day walking awkwardly. Ejaculation helps but is not an instant cure. It has happened from not finishing masturbating but has also occurred sporadically. As someone who enjoys edging and tease and denial, it rarely causes me actual discomfort. If a man is using that as a serious way to pressure someone into having sex, The proper response is something like, "Not my problem." No means no. Feel free to go masturbate in the other room if you are worried about it. Then end the relationship. Story 82. Mild headache. Very rare. I think I have only experienced it a couple of times in my life. Never let a person use this as leverage. Story 83. Aching in the testicles and slight pain in the lower abdomen. If you can take care of it early on, it will be fine. If you are 15 and repeatedly jumping your girlfriend on the couch for hours, the testicles will be sore for a while. Story 84. It feels like you are ready to go, with a sense of anticipation. You are probably having fun up to that point. What is the female equivalent? Story 85. Had it once in my early 20s. If I recall correctly, it was a numb pain that made it hard to walk. Had to go home and make yogurt, if you know what I mean. Instant relief. Story 86. It feels like there is a lot of pressure on my testicles. Many things hurt. It is painful to walk and to urinate. Touching them makes them feel strange. Then you have to think about what caused this discomfort in the first place, and I assure you it is nothing to be happy about. It is very unpleasant. Story 87. I'm not a man, but I totally get an achy feeling in my genital area. Feels like throbbing. Blood is rushing to certain areas, making them sensitive and aroused. When that blood flow is quickly cut off, it creates an ache. So yes, it is real and it is also manipulation. However, women are seldom turned down for sex. I definitely have been, and I know that feeling in the heat of the moment. I have complained about my genital area hurting and throbbing and being wet. After arousal, this can feel uncomfortable. This is sometimes how we feel after sex if we don't climax, or at least how I feel. Story 88. Beats me. I've never had them. Nobody I knew ever talked about having them. I always thought they were a myth. Story 89. For some of us, it can be incredibly uncomfortable. In my 20s, I learned not to let myself get too aroused unless sex was going to happen. It helps but still feels unpleasant. Story 90. It is like when someone says, "Bless you," right before you sneeze, and then you cannot sneeze. Then, someone gives you a painful twist in your side. Story 91. A constant aching pain or pressure. It feels like someone who does not know what they are doing when touching you is being slightly too rough and will not stop. The worst part is that it usually occurs in situations where you can do nothing about it, because if the girl does not want to go further, she will not be okay with you stopping and handling it yourself. The only time I have experienced this is when getting turned on from long sessions of making out or grinding that go nowhere. Story 92. It is probably an apples to oranges comparison. It feels like a dull ache but is sensitive to being bumped. The pain can radiate up into the pubic area. I do not know what to compare it to. However, it can be painful. In my experience, if the pain builds for a while, the next orgasm can be a little painful as well. Story 93. Similar to a brain freeze, but in your testicles. That would be something like an ovary ache if you are a woman trying to imagine it. According to Wikipedia, women can get blue vulva, which is the female equivalent. Story 94. It feels like they are too swollen. It is not a stinging pain. It is an aching cramp pain. But they are not swollen with fluid. They are swollen with blood. This condition is called epididymal hypertension. But it is real. I used to get it when I was in high school and college. The first time I clearly remember was after I went on a first date to a movie with a girl I really liked. We spent the whole time holding and massaging each other's hands and just lightly, but innocently, touching each other. It may have been innocent, but that does not change the fact that I was erect for about 3 hours. Or that, after the date, I got home with underwear soaked with fluid. Or that I could not even masturbate because my groin felt like it had been bruised all night. It can feel so painful sometimes that you do not even want to use it as an excuse for sex because you are too uncomfortable right now. Story 95. A semi-dull throbbing pain in your testicles that reaches up into the lower abdomen. The testicles are extremely tender and need to be handled with care. The solution is to quickly but very carefully release that pressure as soon as possible. Story 96. It is painful, not constant. and not significant enough to let someone manipulate you with guilt. Any person who tries to manipulate you with discomfort is unkind. Story 97. It ranges from a dull numb pain to sharp pain that really hurts. Even after you ejaculate, it still hurts for a bit, but it goes away. This happens if you have been close to orgasm for a long time or multiple times of becoming aroused without ejaculating. Story 98. Epididymal hypertension is unpleasant. Orgasming or ending arousal typically causes the unpleasant symptoms to subside. Like females, however, we enjoy orgasming. Story 99. It is only mildly physically painful. If you have ever overcome an addiction or been very hungry or thirsty, you have some idea of what it feels like psychologically. It is quite painful psychologically, and the worst part is that it continues indefinitely. The discomfort persists until ejaculation occurs. Even mild, continuous pain can become unbearable over time. It can make you feel like you are going insane if it does not stop. Story 100. I've only ever had it happen to me once. It felt like someone with a very firm grip was squeezing my testicles tightly. Not tight enough to incapacitate me, but just enough to be very uncomfortable for about an hour. Story 101. Honestly, the only thing I have noticed is a slight throb of discomfort. It is not anything really painful at all. Story 102. I have an untreated inguinal hernia that has been in my lower abdomen since I was around 16 or 17. When I first had it examined, it was small and intermittent, so the doctors did not want to take any action. Now, 20 years later, it has caused some issues in my life, but never enough to prompt me to have it fixed. I know I should, but the recovery would mean weeks off work and being incapacitated, so I have not done it yet. I also have an untreatable case of degenerative discs in 2 of my lower lumbar spine discs. This causes significant sciatic pain and soreness, but I try to work out and build core muscles to manage the pain better. I mention these issues because I believe a combination of them contributes to what I consider a unique blue ball experience. If I get blue balls and do not address it promptly, the pain in my sciatic area, specifically in my upper left buttock and the top of the crevice between my groin and upper thigh, feels like it is on fire. The pain worsens and radiates down my leg and back the longer I wait. Eventually, relieving the discomfort only tenderizes my testicles, especially the left one, and causes soreness to radiate throughout my entire abdominal area. While this relief is present after completing the task, the tenderness is normal, but the searing abdominal and back pain is not. I believe this pain stems from blood constriction in the area causing the blue balls. I have explained this phenomenon to several doctors and therapists regarding my back issues. Unfortunately, this is something I must live with for now. I acknowledge that I should have the hernia operation. Story 103. Literally swollen and painful to touch. Figuratively, think of it as a depressing post-clarity without the source. Story 104. If you have ever had cramps from diarrhea, it feels similar to that. I guess it is like what a menstrual period feels like. If I do not have an orgasm for about 36 hours, I feel myself get extra horny, and sexual thoughts start to take over my mind more regularly, especially when I am around my wife. After 48 hours without an orgasm, I start to feel a tingling in the head of my penis, like it is ready for action. Feels like I need to urinate. If I do not find something to distract myself, I start to notice a dull ache in my testicles and stomach. That is the beginning of the blue balls condition. It is not terrible, but it is definitely uncomfortable and unpleasant. After 72 hours without an orgasm, it can get pretty bad. Spending any time around my wife at the 3-day mark without sex will trigger it. Once the symptoms start, it takes about 4 hours of relaxation, distraction, and no sexual arousal for the discomfort to go away. In the last year, the longest I have gone without an orgasm was 6 days, and it was unbearable. Everything hurt most of the day, and I nearly constantly felt like I was about to ejaculate involuntarily whenever I was active or near her. Having an orgasm during blue balls is not enjoyable either. Sometimes it is tolerable, but the pain ruins the orgasm. There have been at least a few times when an orgasm during blue balls made me feel like I was about to vomit. I do not expect it to be that bad for everyone, but it is for me. To avoid all that discomfort, I make sure to orgasm most days and almost never skip more than one day. We have sex about once a week, so on the other days I take care of it myself. It may seem unusual or like a medical problem, but the simple solution is to have regular orgasms, which prevents the problem. Story 105. Oh, trust me, it is really awful. Feels like cramps, but your genitals and even the lower abdomen physically hurt. Story 106. First, yes, it is real. Then the dull ache started after I had become worked up once, and my significant other decided she was actually too tired. I did not even know what was going on at first, as nobody asked me what the capital of Thailand was. Story 107. Basically, it feels the same as getting hit in the testicles. It is very tender and moving hurts. There is a dull ache. I had never experienced this until I talked with one girl in particular and had an unexpected cuddling session on the first date. Story 108. When my penis is erect because a woman was kissing me but I did not want to go all the way for the second time, now my penis is ready. It is stiff, making me uncomfortable. It hurts to walk because it bounces awkwardly, so I have to grab it like an old Western cowboy doing a quick draw. After I realize that the erection is not going away, the pain begins. Instead of feeling like a confident cowboy, I feel a throbbing in my penis that pulsates visibly every few seconds. But I am a man, so I try to handle the situation as best as I can with a poker face since she is looking directly at me. Honestly, all I can think about is relieving myself. Unfortunately, that would be very awkward, so I endure the pain in silence. Since she has not blinked the entire time, I am thinking this while she looks me dead in the eye, creating an awkward silence. Eventually, the blood flows away from my penis, and I slowly pass out. I wake the next day with a shrunken, sore penis. A wave of shame envelopes me since this happened right in front of a woman I have been trying to sleep with for the past month. I am embarrassed. That is how blue balls feel for every man. Story 109. It is a traffic jam. Now, imagine that the traffic jam backs up half a mile while more traffic keeps coming. Have you ever seen videos of cars piled up on ice with more traffic continuously barreling in? Feels like that, except this happens in the narrow tube between the testicle and the penis. It usually causes muscles to tighten, pulling the testicles upward. There is often some swelling of the testicles as well. Story 110. Like the feeling before diarrhea, but it is in your testicles and lower stomach and not that intense. It is a pulling sensation inside. Story 111. It feels somewhat like needing to urinate. There is a vague discomfort in my groin that lasts for about 15 to 50 minutes. The sensation is tense and uncomfortable. It has never been painful, but it is definitely unpleasant. Story 112. Never had them. I always assumed guys just used it as a lame excuse to get a hesitant girl to help them. Story 113. I think of it as a big disappointment. It is like believing you have a winning lottery ticket, only to find out you read the date wrong. Story 114. It feels like a circus clown pulling on you and making a balloon animal while they slap you as if you owe them money. Story 115. Kind of like a cramp, but in my testicles and lower abdominal region. Not a good experience. I have only had it a couple of times, fortunately. Story 116. It is just a term. It is not about the testicles but the penis. Thankfully, age has liberated me from those painful erections, but when I was younger and very aroused, it would indeed become painful. I think it is simply about blood pressure. It gets so high that it feels like the penis is about to burst. Imagine a horrible migraine but in your groin. You do the belt tuck and it hurts when you move. If you lose the erection, the pain goes away completely, but in the midst of it, you just think of release. The presence of women can be very agonizing in this state because, without release, it makes the pain worse. Story 117. 39 years old and have never experienced it. I am convinced blue balls are as mythical as Australian drop bears. Story 118. After 3 days of sexting without masturbating, I can tell you it is better not to know. I walk like a gorilla. It feels like being poked in the eyes constantly. Tonight will be a relief. Story 119. You are a woman, so there is no physical comparison you will understand. It is like us asking you what periods and their cramps feel like. Story 120. Nothing, never had it or know any guys who have. We joke around and use it as a phrase once in a blue moon. She's gonna give you blue balls. Meaning she'll probably be a tease in a bad way, leading you on and never actually following through. Every so often, sperm recycles in the body, which can be a little tingly and feel a bit tight, but certainly not anything past a 2 on the pain scale. I'd imagine you'd have to be completely celibate to get there. Story 121. It just stings, like your testicles are a pin cushion. The pain radiates into your bladder, and it is uncomfortable to walk. Story 122. In my personal experience, it does not exist. Some men say they feel a cramp, but I would say many men use it as an excuse to pressure women into doing things they do not want to. Story 123. I heard that there is a physiological point at which the ejaculate cannot physically retract and is therefore held in the testicles, creating a painful sensation that can only be relieved by ejaculation. I do not know if this is true. Story 124. It feels like a bad case of constipation, but lower and in a more sensitive area. It goes away on its own after a couple of hours. Any man saying it is permanent is not telling the truth. Story 125. Here's a good way to look at it. There are different stages of arousal for men both mentally and physically. I'd say we only get blue balls when we're at our most heightened stage and we need to take care of it or it will begin to hurt. The running joke of when you're stressed right before your class presentation would not be one of these times. That would be an instance where we just need to take a few minutes, think about something else, like how the Steelers are now that Aaron Rodgers is officially signing. Now we're not going to tank for draft picks, and we're just in the same limbo we've been in for years. Hypothetical, of course. The situation will take care of itself. There isn't any necessity to excuse ourselves and take care of it privately. We're fine here. It's just annoying. Blue balls implies the stage beyond, it'll go away on its own, where we're too pent up physically and mentally, and it's a high priority for us to take care of ourselves. Typically, we get there in our free time. I've started to feel this when I've gone down on her before I ever get in because in that heat of the moment, I'm so well into that stage, and the heightened desire to mentally and physically takes complete control. But where blue balling comes into play is when we can't get that relief, whether by ourselves or with someone else. I'm sure other men might feel differently or could have worded this better, but this is my best interpretation. For the record, by no means do I say if you're with your partner and he's at that stage, you are obligated to take care of his situation. If you don't want to or change your mind midway, you have every right not to. Admittedly, it isn't the end of the world. We're not writhing in pain or going to die without your help. That doesn't mean we enjoy feeling that way, but we'll survive. I figured I'd add this before others replied with it, and I had to edit it in here. Story 126. I'm a man, and until reading the comments, I didn't even realize blue balls were an actual condition. I thought it was just an expression meant to convey sexual frustration or pressure and guilt-trip women who don't know any better about male anatomy into sex. However, there is no way it causes some immense pain like some people describe, acting as if they are immobilized by it. Be serious. Story 127. I kind of doubt it feels much different for women. There may be some physical sensation due to the production of semen creating a sense of tightness in the testicles. However, generally, if you just edge repeatedly without climaxing and then try to walk around, that gives a good idea of how it feels psychologically. Story 128. Well, it isn't causing testicular discoloration, but if it happens, it is really painful. It should not have any impact on health, but it hurts a lot. It occurs when a man builds up pressure for a long time and, right before ejaculation, forcibly stops it multiple times. Some call this edging, but real edging, if done for more than an hour, can be very painful. Story 129. Tons of pressure inside, cramp-like pain. Extremely sensitive to touch and movement. Pain seems to travel into my lower back if it lasts too long. Do not recommend. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.